Stewart Mandel of Fox Sports. Stewart, welcome back to BYU Sports Nation.
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
I want to know who had the bigger smile on their face when this matchup was announced. Was it you or the Vegas Bowl director, John Cicenti?
It's exciting to me, but I'm not the one who's got a sold-out stadium in 24 hours, so I'm sure it's him.
Yeah, like the rest of us, we noticed this matchup and thought, "Wow, this is going to be one of the better bowl games." You ranked all the bowl games. You put BYU and Utah at 11, which essentially is the fifth non-New Year's Six game. What went into ranking them number 11?
Yeah, I probably could have been a couple spots higher, but it's kind of a combination of the team's record and just national intrigue. And if you're going solely by record, maybe it would be a little bit lower. But come on, this is the Holy War in a bowl game. Like I just said, 24-hour sellout. I mean, this is going to be awesome, especially because normally you wouldn't see a bowl on December 19th so high up that list. That first weekend and even into the next week, those are, for the casual fan, just kind of warm-up bowls until we get to the really important ones. So to have a game of this magnitude that first weekend is great.
From the national perspective, how is the BYU-Utah rivalry viewed right now?
I don't think nationally most people realize just how bitter it is. I got a nice glimpse into that on Twitter last week, for sure. But it was even nastier than I thought it would be. But I thought going in it would be. Yeah, I don't think people nationally quite realize that. First of all, they haven't played in a couple of years, and it wasn't that long ago that they were in the same conference. It was just a Mountain West game, and maybe people look at it more like that than about. Basically, I just feel you guys are much closer to it than me. I just feel it's kind of a lot nastier since Utah moved up to the Pac-12.
Yeah, and the hiatus has certainly played into that, and now it's only going to be 1 year where they didn't play. It's the end of the second year now where they didn't plan on this, but it's happening, and to me it's awesome. But when you look at the matchup, and you add Bronco Mendenhall coaching for BYU when he's the new head coach of Virginia, what kind of dynamic does it add to this game, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I think it's great that Bronco Mendenhall is going to coach in the game, because so many times when the guy gets the new job, he's immediately gone, and there's an interim coach, and that takes a little bit of excitement away from the bowl. This is a case where a guy who's been there for 10, 11 years, had a great run, is going to get a proper send-off. The guy I wish was going to be there playing is Devontae Booker, because that would, in my opinion, make it that much more interesting a game. Without him, Utah is not the team that it was by any means, and maybe that makes it a little bit more even matchup. I think with him, Utah would probably go into this as a decent favorite. Now, I certainly think either team can win.
Stewart Mandel of Fox Sports, college football insider, reporter, and writer for FS1 as well, joining us on BYU Sports Nation. Stewart, right now, this is a reality in our life. StubHub tickets have the cheapest ticket to the Vegas Bowl at $185 a pop. Alabama, Michigan State is at $150. What is your reaction to that?
They need to get a bigger stadium. That's a cute little stadium in Vegas, but it's not meant for a matchup like this. I wonder how big you could go before it wouldn't be sold out. I wonder, if you moved it to, and obviously there's nowhere to move it in Vegas, but if you moved it to a different bowl game, if you moved it to the Foster Farms Bowl where they're playing the 49ers stadium, if they fill that, that would be pretty interesting to see. But as it is now, you're trying to fill a 40,000 seat. Everybody wants to get into this game, can't all fit into a 40,000-seat stadium. I'm not sure what the answer is there.
And they've added 3,000 to try and accommodate that, so it's up to 38,500. Now BYU has an opening for a head coaching position. How attractive is this job on the national landscape, given that you have to be an active member of the church?
Well, that certainly narrows the candidates quite a bit, but the guys who would qualify that will obviously find it to be a very intriguing job. BYU is the school for those guys. Now, you talk about Ken I can never get his name right. Numa. He's got a pretty good job where he is. I know that BYU is interested and vice versa, and if he comes, that's a great hire for BYU. If he stays, I totally understand because of the situation he has. If he says no, then you're probably looking at guys who are not established head coaches like he is. Lance Anderson, the defensive coordinator at Stanford, would be up for it, and given the fact that he's had this run under both Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw, that would be a really good hire as well. But beyond that, this is a very limited pool of possible candidates because of that policy.
What kind of a program do you see the new BYU coach inheriting?
Well, it's a program that has a lot of support. Obviously, I always say that they're not in the Power 5 conference, but they have a bigger stadium and more fan support and more resources than a lot of the schools that did open in the Power 5 this year. I think the one turnoff would be that, I've said it many times, I think BYU is in a bit of a no man's land right now. I think that being an independent was a good idea at the time that it happened, when the structure was what it was with the PCS. Now it's actually, Houston had an easier path to a New Year's Six Bowl than BYU would. If BYU had the same record Houston did, I don't know if they would be going in. So that to me is a bit of a turnoff, in that you're realistically not going to be playing for a national championship, and your chances of a New Year's Six Bowl, you have to just have pretty much a dream season. So you're probably going to be playing in the Vegas Bowl and the Hawaii Bowl quite a bit.
And let's go there, because other conferences are kind of waging, verbal combat with the Big 12 and its championship games and legislation and whatnot. And BYU fans hoping that the Big 12 is forced to expand and that they're one of those candidates. Do you see the Big 12 expanding in the next couple of years?
I see the Big 12 expanding eventually, but I don't think it's imminent. If they had gotten snubbed from the playoff again this year, then I'm sure there would be all sorts of soul-searching in that conference about what to do. It does look like they are still suffering a little bit from not having a championship game. It didn't hurt. It didn't cost Oklahoma a spot in the playoff, but I think it cost, for one thing, it cost Baker Mayfield a trip to New York. I think he'd be a Heisman finalist if he had played the last weekend. So they need to look into that a little bit. But again, they're right now talking about passing that legislation so that they would be able to do it with 10 teams.
Stewart Mandel of Fox Sports joining us on BYU Sports Nation, college football insider and expert. When you look at this BYU coaching vacancy, if you had to pinpoint one name, and I know you already referenced Ken Niumatalolo, but what about a guy like Kyle Whittingham? Would he factor in at BYU? Do you think that would be a good move for him going from Utah to BYU?
Well, could the rivalry get a little bit more intense? If that happened, my gosh. He was unhappy with Utah a year ago this time. You remember all the things that were going on with his contract extension and staff and assistants leaving. I think that's all quieted down quite a bit. I think that doesn't mean you can stay at Utah forever. I'd be surprised if when he did decide to leave Utah, if it would be for BYU.
Stewart, who do you see winning the national championship this year?
That's probably the toughest question you've asked me so far. When it looked like it was going to be Oklahoma-Alabama in a semifinal, I was saying the winner of that game wins the national championship. Now that they're not, you kind of got to look at the matchups. I think Oklahoma's actually got pretty favorable. I think both of those teams have pretty favorable matchups in terms of the styles of play. If it gets to be Oklahoma-Alabama, my lean is Alabama, but I'd like to see the two of them in their semifinals first, because January 11th is just so far away. And you saw last year, by the time we got to that game, Ohio State seemed like a completely different team than they were at the end of the regular season. And you could see that both good or bad with these teams. It's just so far away. There's so many variables. You don't know what version of these teams you're going to be getting.
Follow him at SL Mandel on the Twitter machine. Stewart, major props to you for being brave enough to engage BYU and Utah fans on Twitter.
It's been fun, and it's been an interesting window into the rivalry, because when I initially tweeted the news that this was probably going to happen, I thought it was going to be universal excitement. I did not realize how angry Utah fans were going to be about it. So that proved to be an interesting window into that. And my mailbag, which goes up hopefully momentarily, you'll see some pretty interesting Utah fan emails in there as well.
We'll look for it. Thanks a lot, Stewart.
All right, thanks for having me.